Hello, hello, and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and I am your host. And this is a place where we share wisdom. We share real life experiences. It's not about offering up opinions or telling you what to do. It's real life information and real life experiences on things that we've done in our lives to help you find better, and maybe you can pick up some ideas that you can apply to your own life. So share this, share this. It's all about sharing and helping people learn about how to live a better life. And I'm thrilled. I am thrilled today to have my guest. His name is Colton Petry, and he is the podcast host of Just Dumb Enough podcast. And he had me on because I guess I'm just dumb enough too, and we had a great time. So if you're looking at us on my YouTube channel, you see both of us are have our headphones on and we're looking really dorky, and but we're gonna have a really great time. Colton, welcome to Finding Better. Thank you for joining us.
John, thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is the podcast aesthetic. You got to have big over your headphones.
Yeah, that's it. You gotta look cool. And so, yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining me. This is I love doing this because you were one of the first people who invited me to your podcast, and I had such a great time. And you were such a gracious host, and I wanted, and we had, and you offered so much in terms of your own experiences that I'm so grateful that you've joined me on my podcast. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. I
Yeah.
mean, thank you for joining me on mine because it's like I get to be the professional idiot as much as I want to be, and I get to have so many cool people like you on the show.
Well, I love your show because just dumb enough because for me, a very good friend of mine told me that my superpower is that I ask the questions nobody else wants to ask. And in a lot of ways, I say the things that nobody else wants to say, right? Everybody wants to say it, but they just don't. And so your podcast for me was about giving me the license to ask whatever questions I wanted to ask because the assumption is, yes, Suzuki, you're just dumb enough. And so anyway, it was a great time, and you've been an amazing. And so anyway, yeah, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your journey on what you went through, uh, that folks can learn from. And you shared a few things with me that I thought were really, really amazing insights and experiences.
Yeah, I really felt like, if you want to find better, sometimes it is that classic story, like things are going to get a lot worse. And I thought
Always.
always, yeah. I really thought that I found like my dream, my calling, my career and everything at the age of 16, where I was
Nice.
like,
Not very many
yeah,
people can say that.
yeah. And I found it, locally. I found a fire department that was accepting students at 16. And so I'm like, wow, I should really get into this. Like, what a cool experience.
No kidding.
Yeah. And I just like, I threw myself into it, heart, mind, and body kind of a thing. And I graduated early. I like threw all the money I had to into schooling. Like I was off and running before I was even legally an adult.
Uh, As holy cow. I mean, that is at some point in time, every little boy's and some little girl's dream is being a fire. I'm gonna say fireman, but fire person, right? Whatever
Yeah,
it is we say call them these days. And so even before you were old enough to vote,
yeah, yeah.
you
Like
found
I said,
yourself.
before I could vote, before I was an adult, like I couldn't do any of that stuff. They were like, "Do you have a driver's license?" And I said, "Is it important?" And they're like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Then I have a driver's license."
I'll figure it out. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, you do what you got to do. You do
Yeah.
what you got to do, right?
Well, and that was my thing is like I said, graduated high school early so that I could put in, hundreds of hours volunteering because I was like, this is the only way I'm going to learn.
That's
I got to get
amazing.
into it full
Hmm.
steam. And I really thought like firefighting was going to be the thing where I'm like, oh, like this is so fun. I get to put on the big coats and I get to go into burning buildings. And they were like, well, you should really take, an entry level medical class. I'm like, yeah,
Hmm.
sure. I guess if it helps, like I'll do that. And I got into that and I'm like, I actually like this better than firefighting.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, and so how long, I mean, you can make a whole lifetime career out of firefighting, right? I mean, you work your way up, you become I think of a captain. I don't know what they call it, a battalion chief or whatever it is, and you work your way all the way up. But how long were you a firefighter?
Yeah, so I was a firefighter paramedic because I did dual role.
Nice. Uh-huh.
I did that from '09 to 2001, so 12 years.
12 years.
And I felt like, people when I got into it had said, hey, the expiration date essentially on a firefighter is about 5 years. That's how long most people stay in this career. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
Really?
I love this so much,
Yeah.
I would couldn't understand it. So when I hit 5 years, I was like, that was a badge of honors. I'm like, I've beat the average. I don't know
Yeah.
why this is the average, but I crushed it. Like moving on because I
No
don't
kidding.
understand.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and so why is it that that it's a 5 year shelf life?
I think it's a couple things. Number one, it's very hard. Like
Yeah,
it's a
for
physically
sure.
demanding career. It mentally wears on a lot of people, depending on the kind of service area you're in. If you're in a very high demand area, I think you burn out faster than if you're in a
Oh,
very
sure.
slow area.
Sure.
So, like, my first 2 years essentially were in a pretty slow area. So, I don't know that they even really counted towards my total time because
Okay.
I was
Okay.
like, I'm not that busy.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that, in some city, I mean, it can be really, really intense. And of course, the more dense the population, the more problems happen, right? It's just a matter of math. And
Yeah,
so you stayed on for 12 years.
I did through good, bad, and ugly for
Yeah,
sure
so you
because
you you live the dream. You live the dream.
I did. Yeah, and I mean sometimes that dream and I think this goes to why some people burn out. Like I worked in a stipend job because I really wanted to get into the fire service and I was working about 240 hours a month and I was getting paid $300 a month by the state. And that was like totally
Whoa.
acceptable. Like,
Because you loved it.
yeah, I
Because,
mean,
right? I mean,
and
why else would you do that?
I was like, how is this legal? And they're like, well, the state said they'd pay you a stipend, which means they don't have to pay you hourly. I'm like, well, good, because hourly, I think you're paying me $1.
Whoa. So this was really out of your heart, out of your passion, out of your love for doing what you were doing. How did you survive
I
financially?
mean, the nice thing about that one is that they like expected you to live in station, so they had
Okay.
dorms.
Yeah, of course.
So that like even when you're not working, you're kind of working.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And they fed you
Yeah.
and
So you
they
got that. You had, state assistance because you're like, I only make $300 a month. I apply for state assistance, obviously.
yeah, okay. So and you did this for 12 years.
Yeah, I worked all kinds of jobs. I did, some gang territory stuff down in California. I worked super rural areas. I worked major metro areas. I kind of did it all because I wanted to see everything, see what the job really had to offer and where my puzzle piece kind of fit in.
Wow. And to think that you were so young as you were doing that to figure out your puzzle piece. That's pretty insightful for a young person.
Yeah, I think I was usually like the young guy most of the
Yeah.
time, right? Like for
Yeah,
where I
no
went,
kidding.
I was kind of the young guy because I was like, I got my firefighter early, then I got my EMT early, then I got my paramedic pretty early. So I was always like the kid of the
Yeah,
department.
yeah. Well, it a lot early is a lot of has a lot of good to it. Retire early. Just don't die early. And
Right.
yeah, yeah. That's the one thing. That's the one thing. So you lived the dream for 12 years, and
I
then what
did.
happened?
So about a decade into that, a little over a decade, I was running a call. I got attacked by a patient. Um, I got cut open. They had their blood in my blood, which is all
Oh,
kinds of bad
geez.
situations. It was a really
Yeah.
big issue. And the company I was working for was a terrible private company, but I thought like it's a way to advance my career. And they basically like left me out to dry, kind of cut ties with me, disowned me, and found like a really sly way to fire me without like it being a legal issue. Um,
Hmm.
but just, I mean, really, really shady practices that kind of shined a lot of lights on it. And
Hmm.
I had to figure out what I wanted to do with my life from there because I was like, I'm looking to get married. I kind of want to have kids. You know, what do I want to do? Is this the dream job? Like, it kind of feels like my dream just ended right there. Like, it's dead and gone.
Now it ended because of the company, or it ended because of your decision?
A little of both. You know,
Hmm.
number one, when you have a company like that and you kind of get on their bad side, like you can't really lean on them to have
Yeah,
like, oh, hey, this is my newest reference. Because
yeah,
they're going to be
yeah,
like, yeah, we fired that guy.
yeah.
But the way they fired me is I was on medical leave. And while I was on medical leave, I'm like, hey, I'm ready to come back. I got cleared by a doctor. I'm good to go. And they said, okay, don't worry. We'll call you when we have you scheduled. I'm like, okay. And a month goes by. And I'm like, hey, I'm ready to come back. You can schedule me anytime. Like, I'm ready. And they're like, we're just sorting out the schedules. And they did
Yeah.
that until I hit this mandatory period where they're like, well, you haven't worked in 90 days or whatever it was. So you voluntarily resigned. And I'm like, I didn't resign. Like, you guys haven't scheduled me. I've been trying to come to work.
Yeah,
And they're like,
no.
well,
Yeah.
that's not the way the legally it looks.
Yeah. Now, how were you? This was 12 years into firefighting. How was your body? How was your health? I mean, I imagine that firefighting can be pretty intense on your person.
Yeah. I mean, I think I got away lucky in a lot of
Hmm.
the like physical aspects that people usually suffer through this career. Like, I got pretty lucky. My knees are bad. My knees are
Okay.
really bad.
Well, yeah, yeah.
But
Okay.
that's every time you walk in, because I was always such like the caregiver, the thing you do is you like, if you ever watch a show that even has a medic in it, like they come in and they kneel. You kneel to get like at a person's level when they're
Yeah.
already seated and
Right.
just show like, hey, I'm here for you.
Yep.
But doing that and always operating from that point for, 14 calls a day for 10 years, like my knees
Kills
have
your
had it.
knees. Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. No kidding. So here you were, you were living your childhood dream, and all of a sudden it came to an end,
Yeah.
and with an unceremonious thud. How did what was going on in your head?
Well, and that's kind of where I was is I'm like, is this the dream that like supports my family? Could I
Yeah.
be the guy that like leaves his wife and kids at home to go to a job where I'm going to get like brutally attacked by patients and then hung out to dry
Yeah.
by the company I work
Oh
for?
my
Is that like
gosh.
what I want to be for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Can I be that? Is that
Yeah.
responsible in any way, shape, or form? And I just, I really had to think about that for a while. Um, so I went and I like was seeing a doctor, right? I wanted to get checkups
Hmm.
and I got diagnosed with pretty severe PTSD, which was like they
Oh,
kind of
whoa.
snuck up on me.
No kid. You mean from your firefighting work?
Yeah.
Whoa. And that was a surprise to you?
Yeah, it was a total surprise to me because I thought
Really? So
like
you had no idea what was going on.
I think it's an immersion thing. Like
Yeah.
as long as you're working as hard as we work, right? Because you figure you're either on a 24-hour shift, a 48-hour shift, or you're pulling a lot of 12s.
Yeah.
So I was pretty used to like always being on the job or always sleeping from being
Yeah.
on the job.
Yeah.
So I don't think it really had time to like catch up to me until I had some downtime and I'm like, hey, I don't feel great. And I went and saw my doctor's a friend of mine and I said, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And he kind of gave me this, screening. And he asked me some questions that I was like, I don't know, gave as honest answers as I could to.
Sure.
And he goes, hey, you ever see anything that's not there? And I'm like, do I
Ooh.
hallucinate? Like, no, I don't hallucinate. And he goes, well, you talk about like going to calls and such. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, do you ever go by those places and like see what was going on there? And I'm like, well, we have a thing we call the slideshow, which is like those, it's kind of old school, but like a transparency, right? You slide under a projector
Uh-huh.
and you kind of half see the thing on it. And I'm like, we always call it the slideshow because you can look back on your experiences and learn from them and glean wisdom or whatever. And so, yeah, I guess I kind of see like a semi transparent something where I used to be because I can learn from it. And he goes, so you are seeing things that aren't there. And I'm like, that's unfair.
Whoa. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Really? Yeah, that's a stretch. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. But he's like, you have to kind of think about these things. And so he gave me a PTSD diagnosis, started asking like other questions about my health. Like, how are you
Mhm.
sleeping? I'm like, fine. I sleep fine. He's like, you don't ever wake up in like a cold sweat or hyperventilating? I'm like, I mean, sometimes, but I think, I have sleep apnea or whatever. So, like, I just do that. He's like, all right, um, go home and talk to your girlfriend. Cause at the time I was just had a very long term girlfriend. And she had kind of shared with me, like, oh no, you wake up screaming a lot.
Oh, whoa.
And I'm like, how have you never told me this? She's like, I thought you knew you did it. And I'm like, do I like how often is a lot? She goes, probably like every other night. I'm like, I
Whoa.
was like, that's crazy. How have you never told me this? That's pretty personal.
Yeah,
Like,
no
I would think
kidding.
this would impact you as well.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, it's not as scary as like you've woken up and I woke up to you picking me up like a child and cradling me. And then you started crying. And then you put me back down and went back to sleep. And I'm like, whoa,
Whoa. Whoa.
what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, that was kind of hard to
Wow.
sleep after. I'm
Yeah, I guess so.
like, okay, sure, great.
Whoa.
So
Yeah.
I kind of went back to my doctor with some of that. And he's like, yeah, what's happening is you worked especially graveyard. Like at night, that was my best time. And he's like, but every time those tones go off and you get sent to an emergency, your adrenaline spikes. I'm like, yeah, of course. Like that's
Yeah.
how exciting things work. And he goes, but your body got used to producing adrenaline at night. He goes, so since you did that for a decade, now your body produces adrenaline at night. He goes, which is not how humans sleep.
Oh boy.
I'm like,
Okay, that is really interesting.
yeah. And I'm
That
like,
is
okay,
really
so how do we
interesting.
stop that? He's like, we're going to throw a lot of medications at this to
Oh
see.
boy.
I'm like, when does it, like, okay, it took, maybe 10 years to onset. How long before it stops? He's like, well, you did this really young, so probably never. I'm like, what do you mean,
Really?
never? And he's like, yeah, your body will probably always be like this.
Whoa. So if you were older, then you could the recovery would be different
Yeah, the
since
hope
you're
is,
so
your brain kind of develops over the course of, up till you're like 25.
right, right.
And most people that go into paramedics, like they do some field work, but a lot of the time you're studying until you're like 24. And so your body doesn't really have that much time to get like super adjusted to what I was doing, but I was doing it at
Oh,
16. So I had
oh
almost
no.
10 years worth of time that I was like training my body to produce adrenaline at night before it like set its patterns.
Whoa. So do you still have that going on?
Yes, technically I do. I still work like a lot of the hours that I function are at night just because I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I may as well be up anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. And if you're a night owl,
Yeah. And I've
more that great.
yeah, and I've kind
Yeah,
of
but
found
of
a way
course
to
you're not fixing the problem, but
no.
but hey, you're living with it. That's awesome.
Yeah, and
That's
that was the
awesome.
thing. Like I went through a lot of meds and I was like, I don't enjoy this
Yeah,
at all.
no,
And some
no.
of those is like I was at one point on two versions of the same med, and he said, because we need to get over the max dose to treat your problem.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, hey, isn't the max dose
Uh,
like the maximum
yeah,
dosage?
exactly. Isn't there a reason why they have a max dose?
He's
Yeah.
like, it's kind of a
Wow.
gray area.
Wow, no kidding. So after the shock of your dream being over, right? I mean, you were living your dream job. You weren't making a whole lot of money, but you loved what you were doing. What'd you do?
Yeah. Well, I made good money at the end, but it, kind of all fell apart anyway, which wasn't
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I started, taking all the meds, trying to figure out what my issues were. I started working like a really dead end manufacturing job just because I was like, I need something to physically do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm gonna lose my mind. And it's a way to,
Yeah.
keep making money, keep paying bills. Although money was never really like that big of an issue because I'd been pretty responsible about it. And so I was like, I'm working this dead end job. And the only way to get through the monotony was to start listening to music. So I was like, okay, I'll listen to music. And then I got really tired of music and I switched over to podcasting because I was like, oh, well, I've heard about podcasts. I vaguely know what they are. Let me give this a shot. And I fell in love with the hosts. Like the host of a podcast, I think, is way more than the show itself. So,
Mm.
having like,
Hmm.
real life characters like you, that's what the show really revolves around.
Oh,
And so I was
bummer.
like,
I'm
no,
I'm uh, I'm I'm happy that people actually listen to my podcast.
no, I think you're great.
Uh,
And, I love like education. I've always loved
yeah.
learning. And so I'm
Yes.
like, oh, well, let me find some education shows. And I would find like a psychology show. And the problem became that like the topic got dry before the host did. And I'm like, man, I need something that's really randomized,
Interesting.
like
Uh-huh.
something I can never predict what's going to happen next or what I'm about to be learning, even if it's not really that appealing to me, just so that it's like, you know, totally fresh.
Yeah.
And I did that for like 2 years. And I'm like, I still haven't found the show. You know what? I'm just going to start it. How hard could it be? And so I
Ah.
was just dumb enough to start a podcast. I was like, man,
And again, the name of his podcast, folks, is Just Dumb Enough.
yeah, I had no idea what I was doing. I have no audio editing experience. I have no video experience, no like I didn't know how a microphone works.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just jumped in. I'm like, all right, here we go. And now, like, I could not imagine my life without it. Like, this is the new dream because I get to do stuff that is way cooler than even the best days that I spent in EMS. Like, I love doing this and working with so many other creative people and so many exciting people that, like, get to teach me fun stuff that I don't even know necessarily what I'm walking into sometimes.
That's amazing. That's amazing. There's a whole lot that's wrapped up in what you just said, right? Because I always when people ask for my mentorship or whatever, and they say, "So what should I do next?" I say, "I don't care about what you're going to do next. I care about what you're going to do after that." And because think two steps ahead. Think two steps ahead because stuff that happened to you happens all the time, right? You find yourself in the dream job and something happens and all of a sudden it's gone and you're left out in the cold. But if you're not thinking two steps ahead, right? It's wonderful to me that you were so curious. I look at your experience and you let your curiosity go. Like, what's this podcast thing? Huh, maybe I can learn about this podcast thing. And like you said, you just never know what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
so you found podcasting and what about it made you know that this is something that you wanted to do for at least a while? Because you never
Yeah.
know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's always something in the horizon.
Hmm.
I think what really like it was very early, but it kind of cemented the experience for me is that, like I said, I really grew to love podcasts working like a terrible job.
Uh-huh.
And I got into all kinds. I was like, let me listen to actual plays and educational and audio dramas. And one of those was like my first podcast was an audio drama, and it was called We're Alive. And it's like a zombie horror, audio novel essentially that you're going to listen
Uh-huh.
to, but with a lot of like voice actors. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And when I started running my show, I got, I don't know, 6 episodes in or something, and I ran into one of the creators of We're Alive. And I was like, can I
Wow.
get you on the show? Like, it hasn't launched or anything yet, but I'd really love to get you on the show. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And we like sat down and had an amazing conversation. I'm like, this is one of the guys I kind of idolized. And
That's awesome.
we're talking casually, like, over Zoom, but in my house. Like, what a cool experience. And I'm learning things from all these people that have so
Yeah.
much to say.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. My own little experience. I've only been doing this since the first of the year, and it's just been amazing. I had no idea what I was stepping into. It has been an incredible learning curve, and it continues to be. I'm still on that accelerated part of that learning curve. Without this, I never would have met you. And the things that you learn and the things that we're sharing, your podcast is a lot like mine in that, it's not a newsy thing. It's not a thing where we're based on what's happening today, right? What you and I talk about are things that people can use forever, right? And it's just about educating folks and helping them.
Yeah,
And that's what I love about this. I have another quick question for you
sure.
about your experience. You had said that you weren't that concerned about money because you had managed your money pretty well.
Yep.
As there's a lot of people out there that are trying to understand how to manage money, and that is something that they don't teach in school. They don't. They don't teach you what a credit card is and the dangers of a credit card. They don't teach you about what it means to someday buy your own home. And it doesn't anyway, there's tons and tons of things that it doesn't teach you. And kids all of a sudden wake up one day and they find that, how do I do this? Right? So as a young person as you were, how did you learn about money to the extent that when something really bad happened, right, or you lost your job, you just cruised through it?
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, my mother has said like I was always money conscious. Even when I
Uh-huh.
was young, like I looked at dollar signs and just kind of had to make like, oh, well, what is this worth? And I think that's kind of what I figured out, very young. Obviously, I was working careers before I was an adult.
Yeah.
And I would look at things and I'd say, like, okay, this thing costs $20. How much of my time working is $20? And if you're working a stipend job, you're like, oh, it's a full day. Like it's a
Yeah,
day of my life.
or 3 days.
Yeah. So, like looking at things like that where you're
Yeah,
like, oh, I work a 24-hour shift. I make about $1 an hour. Like,
that's
is this
crazy.
is this little thing? And that's an extreme version. But hey, if you have the opportunity to work it when you're young, work a stipend job because you'll learn a lot about yourself.
No kidding. And you learned a lot about managing money
Yeah,
as
but
you
even
did.
even today, I kind of do that where I'm like, okay, this thing's $100. Like, how many hours does it take me to get to $100? And like that kind of puts things into perspective for me.
What a great way to frame that. What a
Yeah.
wonderful way to frame that.
And I do the
Yeah.
opposite too. Like when it comes to my free time is worth more than my working time because that's when I get to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
So when people are like, oh, hey, do you want to come in and do this overtime? I'm like, that depends. Does overtime pay what my free time's worth?
Yeah. That's right.
They're
That's
like, oh,
right.
depending on the event, maybe. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you are once again living the dream.
Living the
And
dream. And
this
I
time
love it.
podcasting, and you're not shooting your knees out, and you're not risking running into a burning building, unless of course your offices or your studio is burning. Um,
Right.
but yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So listen, you're amazing, and I love what you're doing. I love your story. If you were to wrap up into a couple of sentences, um, what you would like folks to have learned, specifically from your experience in life, what would that be?
I would say don't stop chasing the thing that gets stuck in your head. And it sounds maybe a little weird, but like firefighting was the thing that got stuck in my head. It's the thing I wanted to keep doing. And then podcasting became the thing that was stuck in my head. Now it's the thing that I love every day doing. And I think if you chase that kind of, joy, that kind of drive that you're like, oh, this passion of mine that's really like lodged in there and won't go away, I think you'll find your next dream.
I love it. I love it. Because, it is so easy to give up. It is so on anything, whether it be podcasts or whether it be anything that you're interested in doing. Two things: life's not fair, and this stuff's hard.
Yeah.
Life is hard, right? And so I love that, because I just in my podcast experience, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I doubted myself, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Who the heck is going to want to listen to me? You know, and you just keep going and you just keep going. And I don't know when it was, but I reached a point where I said, okay, this is what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
And I do. I get a lot of joy out of this. And that's what life's all about.
Yeah.
It's about helping people and helping people with joy and gratitude,
Yeah.
I
Well, and
think.
I'm fascinated to see like where you're headed because you are, like you said, in the middle of the rapid curve. So
No,
anything can happen.
learning curve. That's a learning curve.
Yeah.
I don't know where this is going to lead me, but it's sure been a lot of fun. And if nothing else, like you said, you meet amazing, amazing people who have amazing experiences. I was sitting in LAX in airport in Los Angeles one day, and I was just sitting there watching these hundreds of people, go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I realized that there wasn't a single person that I was looking at that couldn't teach us something, who couldn't teach us something. Everybody, even the 5-year-olds, even, I mean, even babies, when they don't know that they're doing it, you will learn something about any baby you decide to take care of. And it's just really, really wonderful that way. And I'm also seeing a really one heartwarming part of the world that I didn't see before, and folks like you and because everybody wants to share. Everybody I talk to has something that they'd love to share. And they're not doing it for money. They're not doing it for recognition. They're not doing it for popularity. They're doing it because it's an opportunity for them to give back. And that's why I love your show so much, is because the format of your show is educating folks and helping them learn.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that's the build of your show is like you're cultivating the better of our society. Where you're like, these are
right?
people that I think are making a difference that have something to say to help people. And not just like, here's a guy that wants to sell a product. Let's go. Here's an hour worth of talking about a product. Like
Yeah,
anybody can do
no,
that, but
yeah,
not everybody can like help make differences.
exactly, exactly. And we're just here trying to make a difference and trying to make the world a little bit better.
Right.
So, listen, Colton, you got anything else you want to close with?
I mean, I could talk forever,
I
but
Yeah, and I could talk with you
it's
forever. Yeah, yeah, I would love to have you back sometime. And
absolutely.
yeah, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your being here and how much I appreciate what you're doing. So thank you. So, folks, you know what? This conversation was about life. It was about life. It was about the ups and downs. And the whole idea is don't stop chasing your dream. Don't give up. Don't quit. And everything is going to be okay. It's always going to be okay. This too shall pass, whatever tough roads you're on right now, and everything's going to be okay. So Colton, thank you so much for joining me. Folks, share this, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye.